Hello. Can you all hear me? Awesome. Good to see you all. Thanks for coming out. I know it's Friday night, so I appreciate you all being with us. It's a pleasure to have Elisa Silva here. Most of you know me, but just for the sake of doing this, my name is Matthew Bernstein. I'm the Associate Director for the Office for Social Engaged Practice, and more importantly for tonight, Lecture in Urban Design Program, which I have the great pleasure of co-facilitating the workshop with Elisa. Before we dive into tonight's program, I'd like to mention two important notes. First, express my gratitude to the School of Architecture and the Graduate Urban Design Program for ensuring that this workshop continues. It's now in its 12th year, and it's really a sort of really important moment of discourse to study, examine our roles as architects and designers in the field of self-built communities. I also want to extend a special thank you to Mallory Zimmer and Ellen Bailey, whose work behind the scenes allow this to work seamlessly. After this, please stay. There's a light reception with some delicious Colombian food for us to continue the conversation afterwards. Tonight marks the official kickoff of our annual masterclass, Designing Urbanity, although students who are in the workshop have already been hard at work. This workshop offers a glimpse into the world of self-built, self-made environments, a dominant form of building across the globe where local knowledge of materials, customs, and conditions reigns supreme. In these conditions, neighborhoods, economies, and systems evolve in ways that challenge our conventional, quote-unquote, modern city building methods. Each year, we invite an expert with extensive experience in this field to lead this masterclass and share their methodologies and practices with our students. Tonight, you will hear from Elisa Silva, whose award-winning practice, research, publications, and exhibitions have positioned her as a leading voice in this territory. I'm certain you will leave tonight with a deeper understanding of not only her work, but also new perspectives on how we, collectively we, as designers can engage with complex environments. Elisa is the director and founder of Enlace Arquitectura and Enlace Foundation, a practice established in Caracas, Venezuela in 2007. The practice embodies a participatory commitment to communities through design. Her research and practices trace the process and entanglements that bind us together, which I'm sure she will elaborate on tonight. With a focus on self-built neighborhoods and communities, her research has focused on public space transformations and the developments of processes that can better equip our design professionals to face urgent needs of social tension and environmental degradation. Her work has been recognized in national and international exhibitions, publications, awards, and biennials. She's a fellow of the American Academy in Rome, a recipient of the Wheelwright Prize, and a speaker at Habitat 3 in Quito. She's the author of two books, Cartography of the Caracas Barrios and Pure Space, Expanding the Public Sphere through Public Space Transformations in Latin American Spontaneous Settlements. She currently teaches architecture at Florida International University in Miami. And with that, please help me welcome Elisa.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much to the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts at Washington University, the students and faculty for coming out on this Friday night. I acknowledge and understand that it's not a school day, so it makes it extra special, or not a studio day. We're beginning the workshop, Entanglements with Contemporaries, and I trust the examples from the work I will share now can exemplify some of these networks that I'm speaking to. It is truly an honor to be here this evening, so thank you, and I will get right to it. Cities mutate. They renew themselves. This much we understand. However, among the ways cities are intervened, the extraction of value from land pushes this mutation to alarming extremes. When market value is prioritized over all other criteria, we put a city's sustainability, its history, and its inhabitants at risk. You're looking at an image from Little Haiti's neighborhood in Miami, and a scene very much in extinction. And this is a scene that no longer exists. It's the Dupuy drugstore, also in Little Haiti, or Lemon City as it was called before. A 1902 building, and up until January it was the oldest of the neighborhood, since then demolished. And this is my own photograph that I took in utter dismay. The impact of one property may not be so immediately felt, but the sum of these types of operations has not only become naturalized in our common modus operandi, it has also had radical effects on people, wildlife, the environment, climate. This mercantile logic is supported by exclusivity, flaunted as an aspirational value. And this is plainly also an act of exclusion. Worse still, exclusivity, besides being discriminatory, implies an intrinsic fear of being left out of that privileged lifestyle that traps its followers in the unfortunate dynamic that associates happiness with consumption, where some redundant beings are conveniently left out. Inequality is thus not so much an undesirable consequence, but an act of construction, conditioned and justifying an increasingly ubiquitous urban model that undermines basic democratic premises. Bruno Latour points us to matters of concern. As architects, urban designers, planners, our concern should be to defend and promote democratic cities and the places we inhabit, concern for countless neighborhoods, environments, and elements that are marginalized. We can contribute by articulating and promoting other logics of urban transformation. The intention is not to be antagonistic, but to influence mainstream projects by conducing and driving palpable experiences that go beyond merely envisioning to embodying something different from today's status quo, something necessarily grounded and situated. The issue with architecture, and more concretely us architects, designers, or other fields of design related, is that they, depends on the perspective, not only cater, maybe helplessly or voluntarily, to market dynamics, they and our mindset continues to be structured by the modern movement. And what that framework does is reduce our understanding of the real, the world, what we see and perceive to such an extent that what we decide to do, to build, where we invest, is at the same time deeply problematic and in conflict with any number of systems: social, ecological, moral, psychological, spiritual, cosmic. And we continue to produce these conflicts. How can we shift away from this course? Well, by broadening what and who defines this world. Again, Latour in Politics of Nature gives us a scheme, but a useful one, for how to go about rethinking the assembly of representation, actors and actants that signify a different totality, a broader audience, and a collective that is always in the process of exploring the edges. As concerned practitioners working in the developing world, we are interested in bringing self-built neighborhoods and their neighbors into the urban conversation. And so I will speak of our work in the community of La Palomera in Caracas, giving a voice to non-human actors such as the Guaire River, also in Caracas, and all water systems that have been turned into sewage channels. And thirdly, valuing rural spaces and their inhabitants with openness and genuine acknowledgement. In general, we are concerned with spaces, people, and life that have been stigmatized, ignored, or separated, and at the same time searching to model a practice, our own, that can better perform, that can be more curious, more inclusive, and embrace the complexity of the real by also bringing into new matter, into concretion, into institutions, and into the world. So what does a practice committed to this messy world look like? A draft that synthesizes my own journey after 17 years of work in Caracas is basically a photograph of where we stand today and where we believe we are going. My intention is to unpack a lexicon of terms associated with this particular gaze on practice, and I invite you all to join in this kind of brainstorming with me. So I begin by asking that we reflect on the word informal and informality, commonly used to identify self-built urbanism.
Que eso de que le dicen informales, marginales, para mí me parece que eso es como para apartarlo a uno, una barrera entre los que tienen un poquito mejor vida, ¿entiendes? Y los que son más, o los que somos más pobres, más tontos, ¿entiendes?
Despite the barrio's obvious visibility, its invisibility, through a systematic denial of acknowledgement, has been actively pursued, a normalized exercise of exclusion from maps, language, and services. Even today, barrios remain for many an undesired outcome of urban growth. A book we published in 2014, CABA, Cartografía de los Caracas Barrios, reveals that at least half of the population in Caracas lives in the barrios, so half. It is overwhelmingly real, not only because of the size of its population, but because of its economic, social, and political presence. My defense of barrios as an integral part of the city goes beyond a call for justice. Because after all, who are we, or how is that justice to be realized? Given how problematic the modern production of our cities has become, their wastefulness and unsustainability, it is rather hypocritical to reserve the positive term formal for that model and informal and its derogatory connotations to this other one. How can we, and then hopefully many, become open and perhaps even convinced of this hypocrisy? Latour suggests that we understand Western moderns as one of many cultures among contemporaries, which include pre-moderns, indigenous population, any human or non-human outside the global north, and other terrestrials, as he calls them. The way we and many can access the openness, that openness is through primal experiences, so things we've lived through our own body. Walking is an excellent tool for that. Walking produces experiences that we embody and does not rely on what we already know or others mention. We walk to encounter those others we have been so quick to distance, and we walk so that we can unlearn the professional deformations of our discipline, and perhaps to the point where other is eliminated from our vocabulary altogether. My years of walking and becoming a friend to the community of La Palomera go back to 2016 with the shared undertaking of 2 public spaces, one in La Cruz and another in Las Brisas, with the establishment of Enlace Foundation in 2018. But the journey I want to share started in earnest that same year with the grant we received from the U.S. Embassy in Venezuela and began, together with Ciudad Laboratorio, the program Integration Process Caracas. These experiences transformed the way I understand barrios. They also uncovered opportunities. Open-ended and undetermined, these activities emerged because they were proposed by locals and started an organic process of initiatives and interventions that made a lot of sense. What I shared today are further entanglements and unravelings of thought, and I trust this intellectual process will continue ad infinitum, given that there is so much to unlearn. What if instead of assuming barrios are precarious and underprivileged communities, we suspend our judgment and look at them carefully, walk, talk, and especially listen? We will find that the barrios present us with a very human architecture, with clues about how space can encourage conviviality. Each home offers the potential for balconies, gardens, and views that keep each structure in contact with its surroundings. A clear way to understand that you are not alone, but part of a neighborhood. And without a doubt, there are typologies of public spaces that could be exported to the entire city because they foster encounters and interactions between neighbors very successfully. A social exchange that creates bonds and affections, and also friction and conflict. The inhabitants of barrios are infinitely more skilled at living together, at that art, and appreciate the value and necessity of understanding others, partly because it is practically unavoidable. We could call barrio residents athletes, as Peter Sloterdijk would say, since their common gym nimbly trains them in the art of managing complexity. And complexity is the world. In contrast to this reflection, urbanism, architecture, public policies have systematically sought to standardize the idea of public space according to formal criteria like legibility, order, geometry, and hygiene, and bring it to the barrio. However, the dimensions of a recognized public space far exceed those the barrio can offer, leading to two conclusions. First, that public space doesn't exist. And second, it is perfectly legitimate to demolish homes and restore what is supposedly missing. A dubious desire for justice predicated on committing a scandalous injustice. The same applies to the insistence on opening wide streets for vehicles, which means tearing down homes when the pedestrian-friendly human scale of the barrio is one of its most valuable attributes. The barrio has the luxury of having many spaces where cars cannot enter. The diversity of activities and people walking is impressive, with many simultaneous activities taking place in public space in spite of limited or restricted dimensions. So why not recognize, document, and understand these alternative public spaces, irregular and organic though they may be, and export them to the rest of the city? Practice shows that they work very well. And these are images of our exhibition at the Venice Biennial in 2021 that celebrate the barrio's public space. When viewing this scene, many think these children need space to play, even though they clearly already have one and are playing marbles. The phrase, "they don't have space to play," is a judgment. Does a space to play need to be designed? The barrio is obviously generating an environment where children are autonomous and creative. Curiously, children playing marbles in Sabana Grande Boulevard, kind of a formal part of Caracas, is mere decor, only sculptures, and they're not actual. But why couldn't the boulevard, and incidentally, this is a pavement project that is a competition we won and built in 2011, provide spaces for children to play? Why aren't children playing here as they would be in the barrio? And this is another space in La Palomera. When learning a different language, I use this as a metaphor, one listens with deference and observes with open eyes. There is no judgment of language. We are certain that we are learning. Hard as it may be, we know it's immensely valuable. The same thing occurs when we consider different urban forms. And notwithstanding, deference is not encouraged among architects studying diverse spaces. Instead, assuming something is lacking is the go-to thought. In this case, there are no chairs, there are no benches, there's no tables or lighting or this or that. In contrast, this passage, somewhere in the formal part of Caracas, would not be judged as lacking, even though it is scarcely used and could even feel dangerous. A bodega nearby would definitely encourage people to linger. And the space in Bellomonte, which is not a barrio but does represent its spirit, neighbors, people that work nearby, and others who know it, meet at the end of the workday to talk, drink beers, even dance in the street, anchored by the traditional bodega. Everyone goes home early, respectfully. The front easement, located in the formal part of Caracas, is completely taken by cars. But wouldn't it be a whole lot better if it were a space for people to enjoy, a space exported from the barrio? A street in the barrio is for people. A street in the formal neighborhood is for cars. I bring these examples to you with perplexity and consultation in mind. What do you think? Is there value in the barrio's urban morphology? Should we study it? Learn from it? Should these spaces be included in our representation of what constitutes design and architecture? Would they contribute to our understanding of the real, the messy real, and more importantly, our relevance in shaping and guiding conversations about the built environment, which is everything that we share? Is including the barrio merely an act of justice? The tired thought that we are doing something good for them? Or does it perhaps enrich our discipline? Might these spaces offer something to us? The story of La Casa de Todos began when neighbors showed us an abandoned space. We found it with the door shut, walled off, and completely forgotten. It was hard to swallow the injustice of such waste. It was clear that the situation had to be reversed. Repair the abandonment, the violence that stems from an unused space in a context that could so enjoy and benefit from it. Erecting cinder blocks to shut doors was a criminal gesture, denying a space to the point of completely obstructing it, cutting off its connection to the street and the world outside. What does a space blocked off do to a neighborhood, and how can a neglected ruin be transformed while preserving the memory of that place? The first step was to discover what was there, preserve what had value, identify what could be transformed, and discern its layers. Then invite the community and the city at large to appear, to contribute, and be part of its repair, which was enacted with a celebration of music and dancing. We received the financial support from several embassies, grants, and private donations, and 4 years later, co-imagined and co-designed, the space has been transformed. A courtyard and a garden occupy the center of the house, and around it, music classes, storytelling, cooking courses, theater, dance, a market, a library, and more are offered. Currently, actually, 14 groups host over 40-some events on a weekly basis, and that includes classes, programs, concerts. So what does it mean to repair? Is repair a physical matter? Erase all traces of precariousness and establish new spatial conditions. We could have chosen to hide the past, but we decided to keep its trace. After eliminating the debris and trash that had accumulated and slowly restoring these spaces, La Casa de Todos has become fully functional, full of life, history, and symbolism, a place with its own personality. And I wonder if a brand new, fully renovated structure would have made sense. Would I and others recognize ourselves and feel at ease? There is so much I could share about this experience, the legal aspects, the long-term lease that we have from the municipality, raising funds to repair the roof, create the stair, put electricity in, collect rainwater. But today I'm focusing on what happened to the physical space and how this whole story makes sense from that perspective. Some gestures were practical, like collecting rainwater. Most of what exists responds to the uses that the people have given it. In fact, activity and what happens is its most salient feature. And when first-time visitors come and stop to observe what is going on in this physical space, they inevitably ask themselves, why is it this way? And so here's a carpentry class, and in the ceiling you'll find some holes, like this one, which is where the golondrinas, it's a bird, their nest is there, and they've been there since before our time. So doing something that would eliminate their space would be devastating to all of us that live and use this Casa de Todos now. The same happens with Cheo's garden, which is previously a bathroom. It has no roof and has been kept without a roof to somehow mimic the spontaneous growth that happened there before our time. And we also, because of this incredible richness of gardens in La Palomera, walked and gathered plants that we've grafted and grown in that space as well. So it's kind of a reflection of what's outside, so that the house is in dialogue with its context. The aim was never to erase what's inside, because erasing it would erase what is outside. And nobody is here to erase the barrio. The walls have not been refinished, but the space does not look ruinous. Heritage buildings often require interventions that make them usable and recognizable. La Casa de Todos would not appear to be heritage. No specialist would qualify it as such. But we have chosen to interpret it in this way. Interventions are respectful of what exists while also creating conditions for use. The staircase is metallic, it cantilevers, and does not try to mimic something that may have been there before. And the same goes for the roof. It's its own thing, but sits on columns that were already there, and this hybridity is a way of understanding the context and the history of the space. Without saying it outright, we gave, I almost missed my cue there. Without saying it outright, we gave heritage value to something that no one imagined could have it. And yes, we do believe La Casa de Todos will become a legacy to La Palomera, to Caracas, and of course to the barrio and Baruta. We believe this hybridity has its corollary in what happens to the people that have engaged with La Casa de Todos, including ourselves. This experience has changed the way I practice architecture, and contrary to the logistic of assistance that is understood more as a mercantile and finite operation, our exchanges with the neighbors of La Palomera do not expire. Affinity, affection, and ties are constantly growing. La Palomera is my neighborhood and a huge part of my life.
La Casa de Todos ha sido un espacio de encuentro para los artistas y cultores de nuestro pueblo de Baruta.
Un lugar de oportunidad para que muchas personas puedan dar a conocer sus talentos.
Es un espacio tanto familiar y recreativo que nos enseña a compartir.
Un lugar que ha sido transformado. Y ciertamente cuando ves la transformación de este lugar te abre ideas para ver cómo puede ser la transformación de lo que tú quieres hacer en este lugar.
Todos tenemos la oportunidad de crecer tanto artística como culturalmente en esta envidiable comunidad. Y digo envidiable porque tiene este centro que es magnífico.
Se reúnen diferentes niños a compartir, a aprender, a conocer diferentes áreas, lo que es la lectura, aprenden a tocar guitarra, aprenden a bailar, a modelar, a cocinar.
Tareas dirigidas, la biblioteca.
Yo aquí hago danza y hago clases de dibujo. Un lugar para estudiar. En la maestra me hace mucha tarea.
Yo tomo clases de dibujo junto a mi mamá.
Puedes compartir con tus amigos y estar en un momento de tranquilidad.
Una buena oportunidad para poder avanzar en mis estudios.
Aquí hago muchos ejercicios. Para mí es un lugar que es muy divertido, aprendes mucho y es muy bonito.
Muy verdoso, muy de jardín, muy lindo y bueno, es más que un simple lugar de ensayo.
La Casa de Todo es para mí una familia.
Me gusta el ambiente.
Construcción, arte,
formación, disciplina y educación.
Invito a mis compañeros, a mis vecinos que vengan a conocer el espacio, que tenemos que aprovecharlo a los máximos.
Hacemos el esfuerzo de que esta casa sea el lugar más lindo de aprendizaje.
De aprendizaje para los niños y para las gentes mayores también.
There's a whole lot more I have to say about this experience in La Palomera, and I'll take advantage of this moment to share with you the news that only a couple weeks ago we were awarded in the 9th Ibero-American Design Biennial, which is Portugal, Spain, and all of the Americas from Mexico down to Chile. We were given the Design and Public Action Award among 197 entries, which is now being exhibited at the Matadero, Madrid Art Complex. And maybe just another quick minute to mention that the waste and how it is managed has been also a part of what we've been concerned with and changed the way it's collected so that you no longer have that container at the front of the barrio, but a beautiful garden instead, and that means a whole lot of work behind the scenes. And concern for this in terms of debris that is thrown over the edge at the top of the barrio. So again, all of these are just matters of concern, very real issues, is part of a project where we will back on the practice that we know is so ingrained in La Palomera of gardening and the gardens and plants, which were in fact what I mentioned earlier, the focus of our intervention at the Biennale in Venice in 2021. And so this summer, with neighbors and folks from a nearby residential complex that's not the barrio, but neighbors to the barrio, we planted 200 trees. And in December, we will receive funds to begin the transformation of 18 hectares, so that's 44 acres, with 5,000 trees. And we're already growing these plants in our nursery, which is in La Casa de Todos, and also a kind of decentralized nursery with other neighbors who are taking care of plants. The forest is an excuse to think about the city from the barrio. So completely the other way around. Most of the time you have some institution in the center of the city thinking of the periphery. Well, changing that paradigm. And this time the barrio leads the process, invites wealthier nearby neighborhoods to participate and to refocus the way we see land with an eye on repair, care, and integration across socioeconomic boundaries. In Caracas, the Guaire River and its affluent creeks are not just contextual. They actually structure the entire territory. The river is the reason the city exists and could not be more essential. And yet, it is the absolute most non-place in Caracas. For decades, it has been the villain, the bearer of bad news, consistently, so it's a sewage channel, and it's consistently overshadowed by the Avila Mountain, which is the apple of every Caraqueño's eye, like, could not be more loved. So you have this parity, this disparity between one ecological actor and another one that is just a mere counterfigure, a receptor of violence, and a true environmental nightmare. So, however, the river recurrently challenges the boundaries imposed on it, flowing continuously, irreverent of land definitions. It not only needs care, it begs attention as a living system that it is. So I moved to Caracas in 2007. Actually grew up for a good significant part of my life here in St. Louis. I am a runner and very much drawn to run along bodies of water. I've dreamt of running along the Guaire River for a very long time. I brought it into design studios for students to consider. I've written about it, lectured about it. And finally, in 2020, through Enlace Foundation, we received yet another grant from the U.S. Embassy in Venezuela and had a chance to go more deeply into this love affair. In 2021, but once COVID kind of allowed us to, we organized walks and promenades to invite people to experience the river, a place everybody was completely adverse to, like, oh, it smells terrible, which is actually, in fact, not true. It is a sewage channel, but it does not smell bad. So we asked ourselves, what does it mean to think Caracas similar to the barrio? So now think Caracas while standing right next to the river. The environment of the Guaire River is complex and overwhelming. It is channeled and encased by a highway, so observing, internalizing, and considering what exists is critical. In Caracas, everything is linked to the river and the creeks that feed into it. Walking along the edge and around the river numerous times, one inevitably discovers its beauty and its potential, rather than assume the river as a totality, which is the way other approaches had always considered it, so something titanic, like too big. We propose conceiving the Guaire's transformation as a thread of many small and separate interventions that nonetheless could potentially affect the entire city with 16 kilometers of a park system through discrete, different, unsynchronous, but possible segments. So the biggest hurdle in this endeavor is not technical. It may not even be economic. It is acknowledging the river as part of the city by its inhabitants. It depends primarily on the desire and participation of its citizens. And to that effect, pursuing other design strategies, other forms of practice, didactic, reparative, and even ephemeral, are actually more relevant than the physical design of that future vision. In addition to the many walks we have organized, which awakened awe and wonder in each participant, we discovered a great deal through research led by Carlos Alfredo Marin, an archivist who looked into the history of the Guaire River and its in the history and the literature as well, through letters and other forms of media, all the way back to when Caracas was founded in the 16th century. And this is disseminated in a timeline that is part of, so the timeline allows you to click on these and sort of as a amazing source of information to uncover that the narrative of the Guaire River has in fact been very, very different over time and only recently has this villainous connotation. So we have this website, rioguaire.org, that unites that information as well as numerous articles that have been compiled by many disciplines, creating a collective of voices that care deeply about the river. We also produced a game intended for school children that provided sensory experiences of the river. It encouraged students to advocate for the Guaire and defend it from the calamities through a board game with cards, and all of these were designed together with two fantastic Venezuelan artists, Malu Valerio and Gerardo Rojas. We will actually get to begin the first phase of this linear park, Rio Guaire, with 2 kilometers or 1.8 kilometers that is on the southern bank of Colinas de Bellomonte, and breaking ground as early as December this year. The operation is extremely simple. Convert 1 traffic lane into a bike path, a wider walking trail, filtration drainage, benches, and lighting. The reflections on practice that this undertaking has prompted for me are huge, and here again, Latour proves to be a very helpful ally. The river has entered the assembly, and many have been consulted. But how do we descend into the lower chamber of this diagram? The words institution and hierarchy, you will read them, appear there. So due to the visibility and the centrality of the river, it is the spine of the city, any transformation must necessarily become institutional. And how does that happen? Hierarchy plays a crucial role. Latour even uses the word triage, because establishing the pecking order is painful. You are weighing many complex considerations to understand how it boils down to the possible to reality. And there will be things that, from one hierarchical perspective, do not seem so important, but from others become institutionalized. Most often, what gels follows the logic of the short handle, and that is precisely what Colinas de Bellomonte represents as the first phase of the Rio Guaire linear park. Its geographic location and political context are strategic. With a sense of pace and urgency, we present it not so much as a project, but an emotion and a matter of concern for many actants. With a vision and an intention, we shepherd that emotion into the institutional channel, locate funds, and architecture's leverage as a practice that builds alliances and acts politically. So we're talking about all sorts of dynamics in the profession that scarcely have to do with what we generally associate with it. This just happened last Friday, 1 week ago. The Colinas de Bellomonte, this segment, is now approved by the municipality with an agreement with the mayor. All funds have been secured, and we will begin construction in December. Fingers crossed. What I have experienced through work with rural communities, and this is the last kind of segment of these actants, has been equally enlightening. And it is vital that we understand that not everyone will or should migrate to a city, even if this has been the trend for the last few decades. Lifestyles in rural contexts have a great deal to offer and are as misunderstood and misrepresented as barrios and sewage channels made in rivers. Once again, the lens of precariousness, poverty, and need do our discipline a great disservice, maybe other disciplines as well. And genuine respect, acknowledgement for ways of living that are different requires requires that we spend time in those places, and it requires deference, like learning a different language. If we don't appear there with people, with our own bodies, walk, listen to communities who are really our new friends, how else can we unlearn reading places through deficiency? For most people, it is very difficult not to read ruralness as lacking. And even if this habit comes with good intentions, adhering to it will keep us in the expired scheme of development and infrastructure and poverty eradication that has done more harm than good and provoked a dreadful waste of resources. This is Media Legua. It's 2 hours outside of Caracas, a project that took 10 years to build. I learned more about what not to do than about the true agency of architecture in this project. It just didn't become obvious to me at first until after many, many months of speaking and visiting and being with villagers. And I became deeply committed to the place, but the project had already undergone its route and been approved in a certain way. So the truth is 10 years means that the community is waiting for this place. And instead of something that can only become complete when all is in place, like the roof, I would now never do it this way. I would understand the progressive nature of it, I hope, or I would, and the formal aspects would just be secondary and would appear, but in a different way altogether, because the process is far more important. Here we see an image of the community, and it was consecrated as the Iglesia San Juan María Vianney. Agua del Espino is in Oaxaca, Mexico. It is the home of Herminio Coronado, one of the wisest persons I know, a wisdom that chooses with complete clarity to live in his rural village, even after having ample opportunities and experiences in large cities. He picked apple orchards and wine grapes in Washington State and California. And he has raised his family, together with Veronica, his wife, in Agua del Espino, and has unknowingly challenged my perceptions and welcomed me to experience the immense beauty and quality of his family life. In Oaxaca, artisanal mezcal is made, and the expansion of that market is very much threatening to make landscapes look more and more like this, which is an industrial approach to cultivating agave. So the impact of this has been something that I've been closely working with villagers through technology, showing them that, in fact, keeping your land full of weeds between the agave that you've planted is far more desirable than cleaning it out. The drone image has a thermal lector on it. Yellow is 60 degrees Celsius, and the red or pink or purple is 30 degrees Celsius, and that's what has vegetation. So basically you are burning the soil and then producing all of the degradation that comes from that. Not only the nutrients, but then it can get washed with rain when and if it rains. So this is what the landscape looks like in a good amount of places, not only because of these practices of cultivating. You can see the rows of agave in the distance here, which crept up over the 8 years that I've known this community. And walking some more, and walking again and again, and finding with them the traces of how to reconcile the political structure of their land. Like, even though it's a communal land and ejido, people are assigned spaces that they can cultivate. And together with them, creating these maps and walking with them to register that political map, we were able to show them the vulnerability of existing forests that, because they are assigned to somebody, I mean, this somebody could be in the United States and have migrated, but at any point come back or leave it to a family member. And so this map shows existing healthy forest and the political land structure, so that the villagers and their local authorities can, through a kind of consensus, allow land that has been already raised at some point in the past to continue to be cultivated and maybe have transactions and allow those that want to farm to do so without having to raise existing healthy forests. We also talked about including trees in their landscape, something that sometimes occurs, but not to the extent possible, because there's this sort of myth that you can only grow agave plants in absolute sunlight with no shade. And that's a practice that comes from industrial ideas of agriculture. So producing diagrams that show that hybridity, finding their own water capturing devices that we have since kind of brought into a very economical methodology to increase the number of these water basins that basically filter water back into the aquifers and humidify the soil in its surrounding areas. To revert some of these tendencies. And that is a project that I've worked with closely with Pablo Pérez Ramos, a landscape professor at the GSD at Harvard. And yeah, it's an ongoing project. Beautiful how the community and its existing self-governance can adopt these measures with a great deal of ease. So these are asamblea meetings where all of the ejidatarios appear and vote and voice their concerns. Overall, the potential is enormous. Over 400 hectares, which is like 1,000 acres, could be reforested with a combination of all of these measures. So, interestingly, mezcal, produced in Mexico, has a corollary in Venezuela that's called cocuy, and that is where the workshop this weekend is centering its attention. It is a different scene, however, in terms of the landscape, whereas in Oaxaca, trying desperately to reverse the tendency of a monoculture agriculture system, here it's already a polyculture. It already is growing with a rich biodiversity in the Guamuy Valley or the Huacamuco Mountain. You can see the agaves kind of interspersed with cujis and espinos and cacti. And this, too, has the threat of disappearing as cocuy becomes more and more interesting to new entrepreneurs entering the field who, with their modern ideas, will tend to reproduce what mezcal and Oaxaca and Mexico are doing in a poor way, but with the idea that order looks like that. And our work is to take the Ayaman practices of these indigenous cultures who knew very clearly how to help the agave thrive, but in its natural context. So that this diagram, which we produced for Oaxaca, where the right side is current practices and the left side is where we would like to take it. In the case of Venezuela, we're already on the left side and trying to alert people to please not migrate to the right side. Earth construction already happens and is embraced, at least by some, despite the stigmas that are always associated with earth construction, because the cement industry did a marvelous job of changing our mindset and thinking that progress and cinder blocks go hand in hand, despite the thermal properties that they have, which never compete with earth construction. So in Oaxaca, I learned through an architect named Alejandro Montes and his initiative COA how to use the byproducts of mezcal production to make adobe bricks. And that's something that could definitely happen in Siquisique as well. This is a beautiful ancestral knowledge of taking the kind of hay structure that comes out of the fermentation process of mezcal or cocuy and the water byproduct called vinaza in Mexico or mosta in Venezuela, and combining that with earth to make adobe bricks. So instead of seeking, going back to our practice as architects, instead of seeking protagonism, I believe design urgently needs to shift its attention, sharpness and skill to work with complexity and respond to an environment that demands a different kind of design, a design eager to stop, repair, and undo the conditions that harm the places we inhabit. Understanding that an intervention doesn't necessarily have to add layers, patches, or decorations, but rather recover a bit of silence and facilitate the coexistence of apparent chaos. And this, I believe, is imperative, messiness embraced with humility. This lexicon of terms, which I popped up earlier, I have brought under the umbrella of practice. And it may be pertinent to think of a different word, but so far my word is practice. And that this may begin to make more sense after sharing the work. So walking, I mentioned, and I will go into walking a bit more. Drawing is part of that toolbox. What to do, so actions are undo, repair, connect, implicate. The mindset and the perspective full of respect, an openness to unlearn. And they have footnotes added to them because each of them goes into a conversation with someone, alive or dead, a book, where a lot of that notion is unpacked. And I am imagining this will be my doctoral dissertation at some point soon. So I would love your feedback since this is very much a work in progress. So to the students, my most sincere suggestion to you as you exit academia and enter the field is to walk, and I mean literally to walk. Between March and July this year, both Cheo Carvajal, who's an activist and journalist that I work with in an interdisciplinary manner since 2018, we coordinated 3 design studios this spring between March and July. And it included first-year students all the way up to final year, just about to graduate. We created opportunities for them to experience the city walking. So 4 walks touched, crossed, or went along the Guaire River, and they each proposed traversing different urban morphologies. So the barrio, the historic part of the city, self-built neighborhoods, car-centric neighborhoods, and the idea, but we would go from one to the other to the next. The idea was for them to explore the city through their own bodies, their bodies being the primary tool of interpretation and understanding. Then drawing and recording their experiences, followed by proposals congruent with their findings. And this is a very short video produced by one of the first-year students that I feel is sort of promising to imagine a first-year student learning to see beyond space itself and to look at what happens there, what it does to people, the joy of people in space, to measure that kind of value, not through formal metrics, but use, comfort, hospitality. Reflections on this experience were compiled into publication, and we distributed to students. I just sent some last week while I was quickly visiting Venezuela. And so, now to conclude, I'd like to share with you a script written by Cheo Carvajal and myself very recently in June 2024. It's just a small portion of it. Celebrating diversity is breaking the boundaries of what is known. It requires unlearning and recognizing that what has been kept on the sidelines and making it visible, making it part of our culture. We pursue diversity out of curiosity, a desire to know and enrich our vision of the world. How can we advance our ability to embrace complexity? By walking. Walking is a liberating act, an insurrection that escapes time and naturalization. Walking is a powerful form of appreciation. It helps rid prejudices and break paradigms. There is a lot to unlearn, undo, and reorient if we are committed to championing diversity. Far from trying to standardize everything in our cities, we should observe what happens in marginal spaces, especially those that promote walking and proximity, like the barrio. The space of appearance is a space where I appear to others as others appear to me. George Baird. Seeking to represent spaces of appearance, the more diverse, the better, becomes increasingly necessary and requires a more conscious and active practice. Architecture and urbanism can be exclusive. Economic development and the exercise of freedom, so poorly distributed, seem to justify it. Responsibility for these threats is diluted in a new religion of the unlimited consumption, technology, and wealth. But where is the implication of the self, our own personal agency? Practice requires engagement and involvement in reality in all its indeterminacy. This confusing and complex reality is the public sphere, where people, diverse but with the same rights, appear together. I believe we should champion practices that pursue plural and heterogeneous models, practices that encourage the potential for passionate symbolic interpretations, practices that recover memory, and practices without authorship. Far from defining results a priori, these practitioners interpret, facilitate, and ensure that critical processes appear more and more frequently through encounters, exchanges, and debates. In a democratic city, walking is the goal. Walking allows us to appear, to challenge a city's exclusive codes and include those that tend to disappear. Walking transforms us into subjects hungry to experience diversity. To walk is to train oneself in the art of designing for complexity and, moreover, the ability to embrace messiness with joy and grace. Thank you very much. Okay, well, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them, and if there aren't any, we could leave it at that, but okay, thank you.